Okay, guys, I saw Thor Love and Thunder last night. After the movie ended, I was talking to my girlfriend about it, and she's like, are you gonna make a video about it? Are you gonna make a rant video? And I was thinking, yeah, I might make a review. I might rant about it in the review, but now I'm thinking to myself, I might just make a rant video about Marvel and Disney and just the production that Hollywood produces nowadays. And how Marvel seems to kind of just be laughing at cinema today. So because this is not a review video, I'm just going to tell you my rating for Thor Love and Thunder right now. It's a 4 out of 10. That's the rating I give the movie. It's bad. It is a bad movie. There is barely anything that saves this film, and the only things that really are good in it is Christian Bale's Gore the God Butcher, and even then he is barely seen in this movie. Think about all the mediocre Marvel films, or less than mediocre, bad, abysmal, terrible, whatever word you choose to define specific Marvel movies. The first films that come to mind, and mind you, there's a lot of them: Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, Thor 1, Thor the Dark World, now Thor Love and Thunder, Captain America the First Avenger, Avengers 2, Ant-Man 2, Black Panther, Captain Marvel, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Marvel's What If, and that is just the films and shows I remember, because I know there's more, but that's how many projects that truly are mediocre, at least in my opinion. And I think a lot of people are starting to notice how boring Marvel is truly becoming, because it's the same formula over and over and over again. Marvel is just very generic in everything they do. If it's an origin story, it's the same narrative every time. If it's a sequel, it's the same narrative sequel. And if it's a threequel, it's the same narrative for a threequel for every single movie. They always kill off their villains, and in one way, that's a good thing, because Marvel villains are not really memorable. A lot of them suck. I would actually say 90% of them are pretty shitty. But in another instance, it kind of sucks, because villains is what makes the hero. It is really what drives the story and fleshes out the wider world. You get a yin and yang kind of perspective, and sometimes the hero's perspective, one, can be boring and generic, or two, is actually not the truth of the bigger picture. And even though the hero does always have to come out the winner, sometimes the perspective of the villain actually ends up being the truer aspect than the hero. But of course, that's too much brain thought for Marvel, and Marvel never goes down that route. The closest they've ever done something like that is with Thanos, and that's why Thanos sticks out as the best Marvel villain they've ever made. Now, I've seen Thor Ragnarok. I like Taika Waititi. I think he's a good director, and I think he did a really good job with Ragnarok. I think it is the best Thor film of the 4 films, and I also believe Taika Waititi to be very talented and very colorful in how he directs his scenes. But here's what happens. When you get a fresh director, somebody who's really in the spotlight, and you get them to handle a project, they release it in theaters, and it's a great film. They did a fantastic job on their first outing. So now the studio immediately thinks, all right, you did a great job on the first film, make the second film, and we're going to allow more free roam for you. We're going to open the sandbox for you and let you be even more of who you are. Yeah, well, some directors should not be able to do things like that. We saw it happen with James Gunn. He made Guardians of the Galaxy 1, which suited the MCU. It was a really good movie because of how different it was compared to the earlier MCU films they were making. But then he makes Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and it is decent, but it's James Gunn just being a little too much James Gunn. We saw it with J.J. Abrams in Star Wars. He makes Star Wars Episode 7, and it's decent for what it is. Frankly, I just don't like that movie at all. But when you compare it to the other two, it's decent. It's the best of the three. And then all of a sudden, he comes back for Episode 9, which, don't get me wrong, he wasn't given much of an option to do much for Episode 9 after the monstrosity of Episode 8. But he comes back to Episode 9, and it's just J.J. Abrams being too much J.J. Abrams. The guy has always had a struggle giving a clear-cut ending to characters and the wider world. And now you look at Taika Waititi. They let Waititi Taika a little bit here and there on Thor Ragnarok. And it worked. But you could still tell they had a little bit of boundaries. Like, Taika, you need to follow this, you need to do this, and you need to narrow it down to a specific vision. Alright, cool. But then Thor Love and Thunder comes around, and they let Waititi Taika everywhere. All over this film. Every corner of Thor Love and Thunder is just littered with Taika Waititi-ness everywhere. It's frustrating, it's annoying, and hard to watch. And this is not a review video for Thor, but to get into some of the details of it, the film was just comedy. That's all it was. The genre should be comedy. It should be nothing else. It should not be fantasy, sci-fi, comic book, superhero, action, adventure, nothing. The film should just be comedy. It's a comedy film. There is not one moment in that entire film that is not a joke. Every second line in that movie is just a comedic relief. Whether it be a joke from someone or a funny moment that happens in the film. And if there is a moment in the film that is actually heartfelt or drama-filled, it is immediately followed up with more Taika Waititi type comedy, and it's annoying. I don't look at Thor and think the God of Thunder anymore. I just look at Thor and think the God of jokes. He's just a jester. That's all his movies are now. The film couldn't even take its own plot seriously. And if you're going to treat your movie like that, how do you expect your audience to take the plot seriously then? So not only was the amount of jokes in this movie awful, but half of them did not land. I would argue more than half didn't land. They were simply just not funny. And usually movie theaters and audiences are filled with Marvel kiss asses. No matter what happens in a Marvel movie, people will cheer and drool and applaud and laugh. This was one of the few Marvel films that was filled with constant jokes, and more than half the time, the audience didn't laugh. And I went opening night. I was in a movie theater where 98% of the seats were filled up. That just goes to show, one, a lot of the comedy was not needed. And two, Taika's just being too Taika about things, and he's gotta calm down. But that is also Marvel and Disney's fault. They should have put a little bit of a leash on him. And I will even say, I think Thor Ragnarok struggled with the comedy as well. It was too funny. It's still a better film narratively, story-wise, but it is still too funny. There is literally a part in the film where Thor needs to go get help from Zeus, who's played by Russell Crowe. And during this scene, while Thor is pleading for help, all Zeus can talk about is having a massive orgy with a bunch of gods. It dragged on for so long that Zeus just kept talking about this orgy, and no one in the audience was laughing. It was almost embarrassing, very cringy, and hard to watch. I almost considered getting up and leaving because I just did not care anymore. That is how I feel about a lot of Marvel movies. Halfway through, it's losing my interest, especially in this fourth phase. Things have not been looking the best, but this was another level of bad. This hit a new definition of where Marvel is going right now, and it's not looking good. At least I could respect Marvel before Endgame where they were following one specific storyline and they were doing something grand. Granted, they might still be going down that route with Marvel right now, but overall with the projects they've been releasing, the more you look at them, the uglier they get. And this is why I appreciate DC so much more than Marvel. All the Marvel fans or whoever else, if you want to rip on DC, you go ahead and rip on DC. And I know I'm in the minority. I know that me and a select few of people around the world like DC more than Marvel. And I know DC beats Marvel everywhere else, but Marvel has the upper hand in movies, and that's what gets the most attention. But DC is so much more attractive to me because their movies are much more serious. I've never been interested in watching superhero movies that are also comedy films. Yes, there are specific characters in DC and Marvel that do need to have much more of a comedy aspect to it, but Marvel is hitting a whole nother level where they're not even taking themselves seriously anymore. And I'm not interested in that. I don't care. And I'll be real with you here. Someone who is a diehard Batman fan, like myself, I find it very hard to sit down and watch these types of superhero movies that are just filled with terribly, awfully written, poorly paced jokes. So now this leads me into the discussion of the type of content we get from Marvel and Disney. And the reason why I broaden it with Disney is because this also has to deal with Star Wars. Ever since Disney has acquired both of these companies, ever since Marvel has expanded into what it is today, and the somewhat resurgence of Star Wars within the past couple of years, they've gotten terribly more lazy to the point where they know they have these fans in the palm of their hand and they can release whatever they want, whenever they want, and still earn their money, no matter how average or poor the content is that they just released, which is more than half of what they release. And you could argue this comes from everywhere. Every production studio in the world is more than likely producing something mediocre or lazy or boring or generic or typical or rehashed, replayed, reused, recycled. You could argue the same thing with DC in Batman. It seems like every couple of years they keep rebooting Batman. The only thing I would argue with Batman is at least every single rendition of him has had something new and fresh to offer to the audience. But what I've been thinking about over these past 12 hours or so, Disney is the first sign of originality completely dying in Hollywood and the entertainment industry, or they simply do not care about originality because they can see that originality will not sell the way rehashed garbage will in Marvel and Star Wars. For example, I have to say when Spider-Man No Way Home was coming out, I was hyped because I could not wait to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. Although, the more I look at that film, the more I start to realize this movie is not good. The only reason why it is decent is because of Tobey, Andrew, and sure, Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina, Jamie Foxx, Thomas Hayden Church. Remove even just Tobey and Andrew from that film, and it is nowhere near as good as it is with them in it. But after months, or maybe even a year and a half of rumors of Tobey and Andrew coming back for that film, what did it do? Well, it started a chain reaction everywhere else. Hollywood has started to make movies and TV shows that are retellings of old stories or new stories with new actors featuring the old actor from who once did that show or movie 20, 30, 40 years ago. Warner Brothers saw this and said, oh, we need Michael Keaton for Batman. Well, that's not going to work the way they want it to, and I've explained it on this channel many times why that's not going to work, but they've still done it because they think that's what's going to make them money. They've done the same thing with Top Gun. They've realized, oh, let's make another Top Gun movie because Tom Cruise wants to make one, and it'll be a nostalgic feeling for everyone for him to come back into the role. And I'm not shit-talking Top Gun because I heard how amazing it is. I'm just saying it's that same kind of territory. I could keep going on to all these different types of projects that are trying to do this same thing, but I think you get my point. But continuing on to that point, narrowing it out a little bit more, it's showing that Hollywood is losing their originality in the sense that the only way we can attract these audiences is if we pull the nostalgia from previous things. It's getting boring. I'm getting tired of it. As if Marvel has not already been getting boring within the past 2 to 3 years. I am extremely bored of them now because the only thing they're doing is trying to pull on these ideas that happened 20 years ago, and they're trying to make you interested with it now. And whereas it may work in the moment, it may work a week after you've seen it or 2 weeks after you've seen it, you start to realize, it really is not that interesting. It's not that captivating because it's not original. It is very interesting how if I go on social media, I barely see anybody talking about Spider-Man No Way Home anymore, but I still see people talking about The Batman. And that's because that movie offers originality and a certain spectacle that Spider-Man No Way Home and other generic Marvel films cannot do. And then this leads me to what bugs me the most. And it's the simple fact that a major amount of these fans for Marvel, Star Wars, even a little bit of DC, are the type of people who just eat up anything. They'll take anything Disney has to offer, even if it's mediocre, which a lot of their stuff has been mediocre. All of their TV shows except for 2 have been mediocre. The only Disney Plus shows that have actually standed somewhat tall and have been decent is The Mandalorian and Loki. Book of Boba Fett, bad. Obi-Wan Kenobi, mediocre. WandaVision, sucks. Falcon and Winter Soldier sucks. Unfortunately, there's way too many people who are fans of these products who do say, you know what? This wasn't a good project. What Marvel and Star Wars has been doing has not been good, but I will accept it because they're at least giving me content. So keep releasing all the mediocrity and poor content that you want. Don't put your full effort into it, guys. Please don't. Please keep releasing average shit. Don't come up with any original ideas. Hire the wrong people for the jobs, and I will keep eating it up because, hey, at least I'm still getting Star Wars content. At least I'm still getting Marvel content. Unfortunately, that is where we have arrived in content creation and entertainment from these production studios, and it sucks. Those voices are, of course, much louder than the people who have platforms who have suitable excuses. So now what that does is it makes the rest of the social media world look at people like me or you or whoever else actually has solid feedback and frankly negative feedback for them to fix in their future projects, and it makes the wider social media platforms look at people like us and say, they're idiots, they're fools, shut your mouth, no one wants to hear your negativity, because of course now in this new world it's not good to be negative, it's not good to not like things, you just have to like everything that is given to you. And this is very unfortunate. I'm a big movie watcher. I'm a big TV show watcher. And frankly, within the past couple of months, I think I have watched more mediocrity than I have actually watched things that are good. It is so easy to watch things that are decent or satisfactory than it is to watch something that's good or great or amazing, because the market is being filled with so much boring, generic shit from Disney. They will never learn their lesson with Marvel and Star Wars, because the voices of the people who will willingly eat up their mediocrity, even knowing they're eating up mediocre average garbage, will be louder than the people like us who have something to say that might actually make them choose wisely in making decisions that will benefit their brand and making better content. Thor: Love and Thunder will be forgotten the day after you watched it. Like I said, Christian Bale is the best part of the film, and even they did him dirty by cutting so many of his scenes. He is in maybe 4 or 5 pivotal scenes in the film, and that's about it. Taika Waititi was out here talking out of his ass about how, oh, Christian Bale's the best MCU villain we've ever seen. I'm sure he would have been, because in the scenes we got of him, he was amazing. But there's not enough of him to actually deem him the best villain, because you stripped so many of his parts. I just can't believe how many people seem to be okay with mediocrity because, hey, they keep giving me content. I can't get on board with that, and I never will. I would rather have no content than mediocre content where then I have to sit here and discuss how bad of a show or how bad of a movie we got. I would rather one movie every 5, 6, 7 years that ends up being amazing than having 4 beautiful looking shows or movies a year that all end up being major disappointments. I've said this before, and I will say it again. That is why on this channel, I will continue to be completely honest, whether you like me for it or not. If there is something that is amazing, I will say it. And if there is something that continues to be piss poor, I will also continue to say that and dive into the reasons why things don't seem to be getting better within this new culture of Hollywood and entertainment. Well, there you have it. That's another rant video. Seems like I've been doing a lot of these rant videos lately. And I know a lot of new people might come across this channel and be like, is all this guy do is complain? But like, it's easy to complain about things when there is a lot of things to complain about. I will stop complaining about things when there's nothing to complain about or nothing to bash or degrade. When something is bad, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna talk about it being bad. But anyways, everyone, that's it for this video. If I keep talking, I'm just gonna keep rehashing the same thing in just different sentences and different words. So just like usual, everyone, that's it for this one, and I'll talk to you all very soon.